Hello and welcome to episode 8 of the Nerd Switch podcast. My name is Dylan, and joining me today once again is my good friend and fellow nerd Jeremiah.
Hello again, everybody. Good to be here.
Also joining us today for the first time, Paul.
What's good?
Welcome, Paul.
Co-worker of ours. We wanted to rope him in on this one since he is a fan of what we're talking about today, which is the new God of War.
Yes,
Ragnarok.
Yes.
End of times for Norse mythology.
Long-awaited follow-up to the 2018 soft reboot of God of War. I was very excited for this game. You remember we did our Game of the Year from years past. That was my 2018 pick, was the God of War. So I was pretty hyped for this one, and we just are going to be discussing it, reviewing it, and answering the question, is it as good as the first, and does it live up to the hype that we all kind of put into it? So, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into our review.
I love that. I love the music. I think it's great.
So the first half of the review here we're going to keep largely spoiler-free for those who maybe want to play it or check it out on their own. We'll just work through various parts. We're going to start by talking about the story, just diving into kind of what it's all about, what we like about it. But we should probably go over a little bit of what the first game was all about. Jeremiah, if you would be so kind, what is God of War?
God of War is wonderful Kratos, ghost of Sparta. He originated from Greece, and I don't know, should I mention like his just heritage, I guess, there?
Yeah, started out in Greek mythology.
He is the son of Zeus.
Yeah, I never played the first God of War trilogy. I only know a little bit about it, but I know it's all just Kratos getting revenge on all the Greek gods for wronging him.
The one thing I know is that the God of War in Greece is Ares, and he tricked Kratos into killing his family.
Exactly.
Which is just so rude.
So essentially, he goes in and is. So Kratos becomes kind of the kind of the runner for the gods in Greece and stuff, and so they order him to go and wipe out this village, and essentially he's just going out and wiping out a bunch of places for Ares, the god of war, and so that is also where he gets the Chaos Blades, which is his infamous two blades that he uses. Mm-hmm. And so he goes into this village and he starts wiping people out, and before he really can figure out before he kind of comes to his senses, I guess, he realizes that the people that he just barely killed are his wife and his daughter, Calliope.
Yeah.
And then everything after that is just a revenge story, which the cool thing about Ragnarok is that it kind of calls back a lot to this vengeance sort of theme.
It's the knowledge in that he experienced this, and now he's in a new land under Norse mythology, and he's trying to prevent repeating history.
Right. Yeah, so definitely they're very different in terms of the kind of game that they are. The first God of War games are very much just hack and slash. You are going and brutally killing these gods, which made them fun. But then 2018's God of War took a different approach, with a much more somber and sort of slower paced story that gives Kratos a lot of depth to his character. Which we talked about the game. It's one that we really love, which is why we were so excited for Ragnarok, because it's now going into the height of Norse mythology where we're dealing with the end times. So, yeah. So we'll just kind of dive into the story here with God of War Ragnarok. With the end of the first God of War, you had Kratos dealing with Baldur, which, for those who are familiar with actual Norse mythology, you'll know that Baldur's death is kind of the thing that kicked off Ragnarok. And I thought it was kind of cool how this game bases upon Norse mythology, but it also kind of does its own thing with it, which is one thing that I quite like. But Ragnarok just deals with Fimbulwinter starting to happen after the death of Baldur, as we move into the height of Ragnarok and getting introduced to other characters such as Odin and Thor and a lot more other gods that way. Wow, the IMDb description for the story is so short. Kratos and his son Atreus face the oncoming Norse apocalypse, Ragnarok. Which, yeah, that's accurate.
It's not wrong.
It's not wrong. It's not wrong.
To get us started here with, now that we've played it without spoiling it, of course, looking at the story for God of War Ragnarok, do you think it is better overall than the first? What do you think of it, Jeremiah?
I can't, it's kind of hard to say like better because both games were just fantastic stories.
Yeah.
I definitely say they are equal to or better than. The better end is just kind of in the details, I guess. This game, sequels are always kind of hard to do. It's hard to recreate something that's when you have something brand new, it's brand new. This has expectations on a sequel.
Right.
So, for what they did, great job. I really did enjoy it.
Yeah, the first, or 2018's God of War did have a really nice sort of simplicity to its story, where they're just, Kratos' wife dies, and then she gives them a final, wish for them to scatter her ashes from the highest peak in the realms, which is just a very simple premise for the story that then gets more involved as Baldur comes into play, other gods like Freya, Thor's children, Maggie and Modi, I think. So, simple story for the first one, but this one definitely kind of gets a little more complex as more and more characters and parts of the mythology are introduced. I almost ran out of oxygen.
So much to say.
I think one thing that's kind of interesting for me is as far as the storyline goes, I feel like it makes a more kind of as we talked about, makes a more in-depth kind of view of Kratos and what he is becoming as a father and just as a individual. But the one thing that I feel like, I don't know, there are some moments within Ragnarok that I think makes Kratos look a little too soft to some extent, but I think generally it kind of brings him down to earth a little bit and makes it so that, because a lot of people that look at the original trilogy are very much like it's just a hack and slash, he's just constantly out for revenge and but I feel like when you look at all the underlying like kind of his motives and stuff like that, everything that he does in the original trilogy kind of are reactions instead of just actions he's taking.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of an interesting, I kind of an interesting take on that. But just per my opinion, I feel that the original trilogy is a lot more about his reactions and stuff, and so instead of just being his reactions to things, he's trying to adapt to taking action first rather than reacting to what he has to. I guess if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, because the first game introduces like Kratos has a son within the Norse. God, I cannot say Norse.
I know Norse is hard to say.
Yeah.
Within the Norse mythology with Atreus, and you for the first time have to see Kratos become a fatherly figure who's not just all about the rage and the vengeance. And that's the thing I really loved about the first 2018's God of War, but they really expand on it in this game. And I think it's one of the game's most interesting premises is just watching Kratos trying to be a better dad so that Atreus doesn't end up falling down the same sort of rabbit hole that Kratos was in. Which is probably one of my favorite parts of what they did with this story. Because you do see a lot more, like, Atreus is getting older and starting to become more independent, and you see Kratos kind of struggle with letting him... There's like a trust issue. Atreus is trying to prove that he can do what's right, and he's keeping secrets from his father, just like his father was keeping secrets from him. And it's just a really cool dynamic to see as they flesh out the story. So yeah, the things that I really loved about the story, like I said, just their relationship is awesome. I loved the story's ideas of fate. One of the big premises of all of Norse mythology is just the idea of fate and how you can't change it. Fate's inescapable, and the story plays with that idea a lot as well. And then also just seeing, like you mentioned, Paul, the hints of old Kratos kind of being sprinkled in, where there are points where he's very much like, I'm going to get revenge. And then there's points where he's telling Atreus, we don't do it because fate tells us to, it's because it's necessary. which I just really liked. What about you, Jeremiah? Anything else from the story you particularly liked? Or
Those were a lot of the points that I really had. I really just enjoyed like the character development from this game. Really seeing old Kratos mixing with his like this new person that he is becoming, and the change you just see from him, you see for Atreus.
Right.
Like I don't know, was there like a set amount of time that shows from the last game to this game exactly how much time had passed? Because we see Atreus is young, but he's aged already a great deal since then. So I would assume it's been at least a few years.
Yeah, I would pin like 3 to 4 years maybe.
And just in that amount of time, we really feel that, like, I really feel that Atreus really changed a lot in that time. He's still a child, still trying to learn kind of being an adult and what those experiences entail.
Yeah, you don't really get a lot of the little brat Atreus like you did in the first game. So yeah, I think they did a really good job with his character, just giving him a lot of independence and also letting you play as Atreus for the first time, which I really liked. Yeah. And you get a surprising amount of time with him as well.
Yeah, there's a lot more times than I was expecting. I was like, oh wow, I'm going back to him now. Yeah. That's cool.
Well, I think it also just creates a lot of variety in combat and stuff like that, because where you're dealing with with Kratos the majority of the time, he's this big bulky guy that just wails on people and stuff. But then when you switch to Atreus, it's like he's smaller, more compact, he's more agile, and
my favorite scene still is the first time you play as him and you go, you kind of leave.
Yeah.
You go to try and open up a chest on your own, and he does the exact same thing that Kratos always does. Just tries to full punch through the chest top and open it, and he like hurts his hand. Even Sindri makes fun of him. He's like, that doesn't look that easy, is it?
Right.
I forgot about that.
Has to use his bow enchanted with magic for strength and smash them finally.
Right. Yeah, we'll dive in a bit more as far as the differences with their play styles when we get to the gameplay. But as far as the story goes, as far as like complaints I have, not anything really substantial. There are a couple times where the pacing gets a little too slow and uneventful, but it's forgivable because it's still building into the context of the story. It's just sometimes it's not going to be as entertaining as when you're taking on giant gods and all that fun stuff. And then just along those same lines, I would have liked a little bit more in terms of grand scale fights like we see with the old God of War games. Similar, like if you remember God of War 3, when you're like climbing Olympus on the Titans and you have all that giant stuff going on. I just would have liked something more like that. Because with it being Ragnarok, you do get a really cool sequence, don't be fooled, but I would have wanted just a little more. But that's kind of nitpicky, so I'm not going to dock the game for it.
Very true. I mean, I didn't have too many gripes for the story-wise. At least not in the way they did the story. Mm-hmm. My only gripes are just people having reacting to their blind emotions, They displace their anger. They're just kind of like going after whoever they felt like was closest to them. And it really kind of affected some of the gameplay. I felt it affected the story. Whereas had they had kind of thought, I guess not really thought things out more, but again, they are gods and have lived for years. You would think they would be able to have thought things out more easier.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's kind of builds upon the aspect of like kind of what I was talking about with the original trilogy of God of War is Kratos is so reactive instead of
and I guess that's why it's like not a full gripe, because they do build on it.
Yeah,
it's not something terrible, but it also could have changed the story a little bit. Dynamic.
True.
My other gripes are spoilers though, so I'll get into those later.
What about you, Paul? Was there anything that you maybe didn't like as much from this story, or
honestly, as far as the story goes, I think it was done pretty well. There are some little things just I almost feel like they'll have less to do with like I don't know if that necessarily has to do with the story though. So, There is something that's specific that I have to that has to do with the story, but I feel like it's gonna spoil, so it'll probably be a little bit later.
All good. So now, story aside, let's kind of jump into another large aspect of the game, which is the world, its characters, its enemies, the environments.
Beautiful environments.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And very happy because 2018's God of War. So you have the 9 realms within Norse mythology, and God of War 2018 does give you most of them. There are a few realms that are just locked off that you never get to see. Whereas this year with God of War Ragnarok, you do finally get access to all of them in one game, which I was really excited for. And there's some really good variety. Standout realms like Svartalheim, Land of the Dwarfs, was really cool. I love seeing all the little miniature houses, and watching Kratos crawl to get in some of them was funny.
Yeah.
I like Vanaheim, and I also hate Vanaheim.
yeah. Vanaheim has a love-hate relationship for us.
The one that I was excited for, but I guess a little disappointed by, was actually Asgard.
Me too, honestly.
Okay.
Like, it looks really cool, and I like the idea of it not being this big gold city like everyone imagines it, but at the same time, you don't really get to explore it as much as you want to. It's more just there for the story. And you do get the final part of the game taking place there, which was cool. I just maybe would have liked a little bit more in terms of optional exploration for Asgard. But yeah, the realms are all really cool.
The one thing I could actually that I think kind of makes sense with Asgard is that everybody within Asgard views Asgard and the Allfather in a very specific way, that I feel like the way that they built the environment kind of adds to that. Like when Atreus goes into Asgard for the first time, he's talking to Heimdall, and Heimdall's like, or he like sees Odin's house, lodge, whatever, and he calls it, is that Odin's palace?
Right.
And Heimdall goes off and, talks about how, he's too good for that or whatever. Like, I can't remember exactly what he said.
Like, just because he's an Aesir god, why does he have to have a palace?
Exactly. And so I feel like it builds upon the narrative that Odin wanted to share with his people, that he was just this, very humble, like, I don't need much, instead of being, well, what the rest of the realms viewed him as. So I feel like it built very good in that aspect. Now, I don't know enough about Norse mythology to know what that was supposed to look like, but I was like, that I feel like that builds his narrative exactly how he wants it to be built.
I think a lot of people would look at the MCU's rendition of Asgard and assume that's the default.
Yeah.
I did like its portrayal, and one thing that this game does quite a bit that I did like was defying expectations. When you are introduced to the concept of Odin and Thor being within this, you might imagine Odin as being similar to Kratos' Zeus.
Yeah.
But it's very much not the case, where you see Odin in this game and he's like this little scrawny old man.
Yeah.
But I loved it.
Yeah, they did a really good job with their character creation for each person. Even Thor,
yeah.
I know everybody was making fun of how thick he is and his size, but then as you look into it, he is not a happy person. He is in a miserable situation in life. He struggles with his family. He's not it's kind of like Kratos. Kratos is put into being a father figure. Thor is very similar to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I loved Thor in this game. He's probably my favorite side character that popped up. And there's no spoilers, but I messaged you right after I played this sequence, but the part where you go to the bar or the tavern on Asgard.
Oh, I love that part.
That's easily one of my favorite parts of the whole game. That was so great. You just have Atreus trying to get Thor because Odin told Thor to take Atreus to not Muspelheim, Niflheim.
Niflheim, yeah.
And Thor is drunk out of his mind, and he's like, "No, go away." And then it leads to Thor pushing Atreus, which starts a bar fight, and it's just such a good sequence.
Yeah, no, that whole sequence with Thrud and just all three of them.
Yeah, but then at the same time, it expands on Thor's character within the game, which was really good and fleshed out just for a side character that's not even your main antagonist. So yeah, I really love what they did with Thor and Odin. I thought they were standout characters. And there are some others as well we'll kind of dive into. We do get introduced to Angrboda, who was one that I really liked as well. Kind of the companion to Loki or Atreus. For those who don't know, the end of God of War 2018 kind of dropped a bomb on us saying that Atreus is actually Loki within this world, because prior to finding that out, there was no sign of Loki, even though with him being a big part of Norse mythology. And so I thought that was cool, how, again, they're tying it into their own story and kind of playing with the mythology.
I liked it. I was very, like, that whole 2018, all, like, my biggest questions were, like, you know, who is Loki then in this world?
Mm-hmm.
What does he represent? Who is he? What is he going to be doing in this world?
Right.
And I could not wait till Ragnarok came out to kind of learn more about it.
Yeah. No, when they introduced Angrboda, I was interested to see how they were gonna to do that whole dynamic, because in actual Norse mythology, Angrboda is supposed to be Loki's like wife or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So like I was very interested to see how they were gonna kind of do everything with that. And
you do get a little bit of flirtatious banter with them.
Oh yeah.
It was cute.
Yeah. Yeah, very much.
But yeah, her character I thought was really good. She also had kind of some backgrounds established with some character trauma, you know, being one of the last giants as well.
Yeah, there was some really cool. I feel like they did some really cool stuff with her, and then adding her grandma into the mix and like doing all that. That was pretty
whole
cool.
scene was such a like just good scene.
Yeah, that was
for
pretty
her.
good.
You go there, you help her out.
Yeah.
You're then helping her just go collect like fruits for the animals to feed that she's taking
Right.
care of.
Yeah.
Which is just interesting to think about, because if you imagine a sequence like that in the original trilogy of God of War, you'd be like, well, what is the game doing? This is so boring.
Yeah.
But the way that they set it up in this game, it just works as really good character development.
Yeah. And that whole environment is just like the way that they did that environment. I can't remember what the area is called.
Jotunheim was the
Is it
realm.
It's Jotunheim, and then it's the Ironwoods.
The Ironwoods, yes. And so like that, I feel like just that whole area is very like, it's very unique. And it's just very cool to like go and see all the different animals and the different plants and stuff. So the whole environment is just very cool.
Right.
Well, I guess if there was a gripe for enemies, it was the fact that there's similar enemies in all 9 realms apparently.
Yeah.
Like the one enemy that always bothered me, I forget what they're called. I think they were like the Grims or something, but it was the fish creatures. One of the first enemies you kind of fight.
They're the ones that throw the like doo-doo balls at you.
Yeah, they throw doodle balls. They latch onto the walls. They're like fish creatures and things. Those are the one enemies I was like I left the first area. I go to the next one. I was like, why are you here? I just left that area. So that was one gripe I could have, that they didn't kind of build that dynamic like they had in the first one. Because in the first one, when you first leave the realm, you only go to like Alfheim. You only had elves there.
Mm-hmm.
You leave, you go fight another area. You fight only that specific enemy in that realm. This one, I felt like they kind of just threw in all the enemies, and then they had like the basic default enemy of Draugr or fish people weirdos.
Yeah, I mean, one complaint I had with the first game was just a slight lack of enemy variants, which they do better on with this game, giving you more realms. The first game recycled a lot of mini-bosses as well, and this game cleans that issue up. You still get recycled mini-bosses, but it's not as egregious as the first.
Surprisingly, the one mini-boss that I didn't see a lot of is the Dark Elf mini-boss.
Oh, yeah.
Because the Dark Elf mini-boss, that was the one that was like the tough enemy I always hated fighting for a while in 2018's game.
Right.
And they didn't have it that much. But they also had changed the dynamic because of your actions in the first game. We got rid of a large faction almost of Dark Elves throughout the first game.
Mm-hmm.
When you give the Light Elves the light, they rose to power again. And it's kind of our fault. We changed that.
Right.
And in this second game, you don't get as many of them there because now there's less of them. They're more of a resistance now. They're trying to build up their numbers again.
I like that it tied it into the story, though, showing that there was a direct result as of their decisions in the first game, and it gives you a moment where they look at it like, maybe we didn't do the right thing.
Yeah, they built upon that, too. Atreus was like, so like, oh, did we choose the right... And that's another thing, too, they even bring on that is, they're like, maybe they both have their war, and a lot of people would say, "Oh, you need to choose a side." Well, their answer is, "Don't choose either side. We're on our own side. We're on the outside of this war.
Mm-hmm.
We just came in to do what our stuff was. They got in our way. We didn't choose a side to fight against.
Right.
They kind of just got in our way." And that builds up on this whole, like, maybe fate is there, but we do things because we have to do them, not because fate said it was. This is how it is.
Yeah, 100%.
Lots of good stuff from this game.
100%. That I feel like time and time again. I mean, they who are the creators of this game? Actually, I don't even.
It's Santa Monica Studios or something
Santa
like
Monica
that.
Studios.
I feel like they are proving again and again that the dialogue that they're putting with these games is just, I mean, it's just phenomenal. And so, like, some of the stuff we talked about are, like, almost, I mean, not exactly, but, like, somewhat direct, quotes from Mimir and, like, just these conversations that they have with each other that are just, I mean, absolutely phenomenal, like, one-liners and different things like that. The dialogue between the characters as they go throughout the story and as they go throughout the game in its entirety is just phenomenal.
Yeah, it does a really fantastic job of giving you that exposition as you're, traveling from objective to objective. Like, there's a lot of moments where you'll be on the sled in the game or in a boat, and you'll have that character dialogue going, and you'll be ready to get off to continue, but you're going to sit there and listen to them.
You're just going to sit there and listen just to finish their story, because you're like, what's going to go? What's this next dialogue option here?
Because it's genuinely interesting, which not a lot of games can do with their side dialogue.
100%.
Yeah. Kind of more towards, like, the worlds and stuff. Like, I liked the new added of, like, the sleds when you had to, like, get around for a couple of the bigger areas, like Midgard, using your wolves with pulling your sled.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was funny in Niflheim that they just, or not Niflheim, Alfheim just happens to have loyally trained dogs pulling a sled in the desert.
They even had an exposition to explain that.
Yeah, they have, like, they always have this detail. I even found out that they have the smallest amount of details to where your first fight with Thor, you break one of his teeth and he spits it out.
Oh, yeah?
The tooth is still on the ground.
No way.
After you go, like, you can leave the entire realm, beat the entire game, go back to that spot, his tooth is still on the ground, apparently.
That's wild. That's wild.
Yeah, I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
I learned so much random stuff for this game, and it makes me happy, because those are the cool details. You're like, wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the story progresses them through the realms as they're trying to accomplish their goal, which the main, I guess, drive in this game is, it kind of goes back and forth, because, like, they're trying to prevent Ragnarok.
Yeah, it kind of keeps going back and forth. Kratos is still sticking to his ways that he doesn't want to involve himself.
Right.
He just wants to protect Atreus and keep him safe.
Right, but at the same time, you have Odin, who is now, like, in communication with Atreus, trying to further his goals.
Yeah.
And it drives the story forward. And another really good sequence that doesn't really spoil anything. But Atreus, like you mentioned, he goes to Asgard. There's a scene where him and his dad just have a fight, and Atreus is like, if you don't trust me, I'm just going to go do this by myself. Goes to Asgard and helps Odin for a little bit before they are kind of forced back together, which I thought was really good. But, what I loved as far as, like, the world and everything goes, I really like the characters from this game. Just, you're introduced to so many more between the ones we mentioned with Thor, Odin, and Angrboda. You also get some more side characters, like Freya's brother, Freyr.
He was a good character. I liked him. I liked, even Brock and Sindri kind of have their friend. Lunda. Which her character's hilarious, and I love the dialogue for Kratos there. 'Cause even, like, when Atreus doesn't get to meet her first because he was gone. So when we first see Kratos and Atreus together, and they're heading back to the camp, and she's gonna be there, he even has dialogue where he's like, "Be careful when we go back there. She's a little friendly." And it's just so funny that he's thinking about that, he's worried about that, but then even Mimir's like, "Oh, don't worry, he's not mature enough for her."
Did you do the side quest where she has you go get the mystery
orb?
orb?
Yeah, mystery orb. I was literally about to talk about that.
I loved that quest
Oh
so
my
much.
God.
Kratos' dialogue, this could be the end of us, this mysterious orb. If it was so important, she would have remembered it.
Right.
And even Mimir is just like, nah, like there's there has to be something behind this.
Yeah,
like,
there's
what the heck is going on? And like I think it's so funny because he's the whole time during the very start of this when she's just talking about this mystery orb, that she's just ignoring Kratos as he's asking like, what is it? What does it do? What? And she's just like, nope, this is what it is. Like, go find it.
You'll get some armor if you find my armor pieces out there. I'll fix them up for you. You know?
Yeah, I guess a small spoiler for the mystery orb side quest, but it's just a dog toy.
Yeah, it's a dog toy. It's a little tennis ball.
It's like her pig's ball.
Yeah. So funny. So funny.
It's so fun. I loved some of those like small side quests out there like that.
Right. Yeah, you also get introduced to Tyr in this game, which is neat. He was kind of hinted at in the first game.
Yeah,
And,
they talked about him so much. We get to go into his vault and see like that he has traveled to so many places, and like the knowledge that he has is just vast.
Mhm.
And I was always excited to see this character, and yeah, that's another reason. Kind of spoiler, I guess.
No, wait, not yet. We'll talk about it.
We will.
But yeah, like we mentioned, I really like the enemy variety. The environment variety was really good, being able to go to all the 9 realms.
Yep.
My gripes as far as the world goes, just kind of like I mentioned with the first game, there's a little bit of reuse with some of the mini-bosses. It's not as bad as the first game, but it's still there.
I like some of the things they did for like some of the mini bosses.
Yeah. It's not as bad. Like, you fought like 60 trolls with the big rock thing in the first game.
There was tons of trolls, but
I thought it was funny because in this game, the very first troll fight you get, like he shows up and you're like, oh god, here we go again. And then if I remember, you just don't even fight him. Like Kratos just kills it like right away, like in a cutscene. And I was like, oh, that must be a nod to us having to fight so many in the first game. And then also just in terms of getting all the 9 realms, one gripe I had is that some realms give you a ton to do and a lot of exploration, and other realms are just kind of underutilized. You don't really get a lot.
Empty.
Yeah. I would have liked to see a little more balance because there's some realms you go to and you only have like 5 minutes worth of stuff to do there. So not too bad, but it's a thing.
One map I'll say was even smaller again was still Helheim.
Yeah.
That map got even smaller from the first game. 2018, there was still at least enough that you had to actually leave to continue the story and then progress, and then you could come back to get other stuff that you couldn't get before while you were first there.
Right.
And this game didn't really have that much, you know. You got to go back, and it was part of the story that you had to go back, and the stuff there you could just do it all in one go. I went there one time for both characters, and I never had to go back.
Yeah. No. The one thing I liked about Helheim specifically was, I mean, that's really kind of the only place in the game, without getting too deep into it, the only place in the game where I feel like you really had like that grandiose fight, except for the end.
Mm-hmm.
But like as far as like just like big enemies and whatever, like I feel like that's really the only fight that is like even kind of similar. I mean, it doesn't end the same way as, you know, the trilogy would have, where he just like completely slaughters them. But
Right.
like,
Yeah, there was a really good boss fight in Helheim. Also, like we mentioned with Angrboda, that was another cool fight with her grandma.
yeah, that's true.
So yeah, that's my complaints as far as the world goes. Did you have any more other than just some of the realms not being as interesting?
Yeah, I feel like that's basically still the same thing. Characters, I was liking a lot of the new characters as well. I don't think there was anyone that like majorly stood out, I guess. We did get a little bit more from the Valkyries. We got to talk with them after saving them from the first game.
Right.
And then I feel like that was kind of most enemies were the end game enemies are annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there was some more stuff that I would have liked to have seen as far as like emotion from other characters, because I feel like there was so much build from Kratos and Atreus and what they were experiencing that I feel like the emotion of some other characters kind of flatlined a little bit.
Yeah.
Just a little bit, not substantially enough to ruin the story, but I feel like there were definitely some emotions that maybe we'll talk about a little bit later, but that kind of flatlined when they really should not have.
Okay. Yeah, I'm curious. Remind me to talk about it. So let's jump into the next big part here, the part that you will spend the most time actually doing in the game, and that is the gameplay. So very similar to 2018's God of War, you just get the same combat between the Leviathan axe. In this game, you start off with the Blades of Chaos already. So you've got the weapons you were already used to playing in the first game. I feel like they did refine the combat, so it does feel a lot more clean in this game. And I really like how it plays. You get all the same skill tree and everything, new skills, new weapons. Yeah.
There's a few things that I wish they still would have had, which is I wish they would have kept a melee-based skill tree like bare hands.
True.
Because the combat for it was pretty bland, whereas in the first game they had a much better added like bare-handed combat system skill tree.
See, I didn't think the combat was bland at all, though, because between like all the weapons you get and the different ways you can
I
use
just
them.
mean only bare hand.
Oh,
bare hand, like you didn't. It was always very repetitive.
Yeah.
And I feel like if they would have added like at least a bit like a combo system for bare-handed, that would have been cool.
Yeah.
Some good skill tree to kind of add to it, maybe.
I can kind of see why they did less with it, because there is an additional weapon that he ends up using in the end. So I feel like with the rotation of the the cooldowns and the different abilities that he has with all three of the weapons he ends up using.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it would have been a lot, I do admit, because I mean you've got your skill tree, which both the axe and blades get their own. The new tool gets a skill tree. Then you've got Atreus' skill tree.
Right.
Hopefully they improve upon that as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of skill trees. I guess that can kind of be a complaint, I guess, because there's a lot. Because you get Atreus's, Freya's, Kratos' like 3 or 4 different skill trees.
And then I did like some things with it, because like we do have an updated version from the first 2018 game where a lot of the skills that were in there turned into the skill tree in this new game. Like the old runic attacks from the first game became part of your skill tree, and I thought that was really cool. Yeah. So then that means you just always have this really cool skill on hand. Some of that got put in there. Some of your base combos from the first game for the melee, for barehanded, is put into your just, like, you start with it, it's the passive, that's just your skills. So I did like that they kind of kept some things, added it to the new game. I just like more things, I guess, sometimes.
I would have also liked the barehanded, because the build I'm actually using in the game right now, like, you don't even hold a weapon.
Yeah, you don't want to use your weapon, because your bare hands...
You're barehanded punching and applying poison, and it's busted.
Yeah, it's super cool.
So yeah, it would have been cool. I think they did a really good job with what they did give us, though. There's a lot of variety.
I did like the better like upgrade of skills, where you just have to use the skill a certain amount of times, and when you finish that skill, you can then upgrade 3 different stats. It's one purchase for either of the 3, and then you can just change any of them.
Yeah. Did you, while you were playing, did you find yourself using the blades or the axe more?
Honestly, I'd say it was really balanced for me. There would be a lot of times I was always using the axe, or I would go I'd go to my blades. I would definitely move in between both of them. I got really good at switching between either weapons while one of my other weapons was on cooldown. And my build, I got to use both, and I just my handles gave me the ability to activate a realm shift. So I could freeze time whenever my weapon built up its energy.
Right. Yeah, I think I used the axe a tiny bit more, but one thing I did like is the game pressures you into switching weapons, because you'll get certain enemies that have like an overshield.
I hated those enemies.
Really?
So the only reason I hated them, they have no stagger.
Oh.
It made like, I get they have a shield. I'm not going to hit their health bar, but I hate when an enemy doesn't stagger. When you're hitting them with this massive force weapon, you're super strong, and they'll kind of wince to it, but they still swing their attack.
Yeah, I appreciated it because it does force you to use diversity with your moveset.
I do like that. I like that part.
Yeah, if they've got like the fire shield on them or whatever, you gotta switch to your axe because it's a freezy whatever. So I liked it. I think the combat was really balanced and fun, and that you just get some moments where you feel unstoppable. Like the game does the whole fury kill thing again, where if you do enough damage, you get the prompt to click the right stick and execute them. Yeah. And there were cool moments where I would get one execution with the axe, and then I would switch to my Blades of Chaos to get the second execution on another guy, and it just looked awesome.
It was really cool. I always did enjoy that.
Yeah, some of those animations for the executions were absolutely like they were just dope. I feel like it was just it was just vintage God of War.
Yeah,
I mean, really.
A lot of it they kind of kept still from like the original game. They added some new stuff to it. I liked the blades that they felt faster, whereas the axe felt more brutal. Your new tool is very swift, and it affects others around you.
Yeah. True. Yeah, I feel like the gear system in the game is a little improved. We kind of talked about this outside of the show, but the first God of War gives you a ton of armor to the point where some of it doesn't really feel substantial. Like you'll get armor you're never even going to wear or look at.
Yeah, looking back on it, there is armor in there that I just would not care to use because why would I use an armor set that has lower stats? You have to do a ton of specific upgrading for it to even try to get it towards your like end game armor. Some of them doesn't even allow. In the first game, you couldn't even do attachments for some armor. So it's like, why would I use one of those that's going to lessen my skills?
Right.
And the other thing is, again, there's also just bad bonuses to some armors. They're not as good as others. So there was a lot of armor in the first game that was pointless. You wanted the end game stuff that was better.
Yeah, I feel like this game does a better job because it technically gives you more by giving you less.
It really did. I didn't see it at first until we kind of talked about it. But yeah, looking back on it, it looked a lot better this way because there's armors I might actually go back to. For starters, the first armor you get in the game when you're just kind of starting the game, it doesn't have any bonuses or stats. If you level it up past 7, it gains a massive stat increase to all of your stats. And you can do it to all your pieces of armor and the handles for your 2 weapons.
One thing that I like that we kind of touched on a little bit earlier with Lunda and the mystery orb kind of side quest thing. The one benefit or one redeeming factor of that what are they called? Paths or whatever? What are they called? Favors. So one redeeming factor from doing that favor is the armor that she says you can collect as you go throughout, the worlds and stuff. And it's kind of funny because, I mean, really that is the redeeming factor for that favor. I mean, other than it just being a funny favor, but like... the redeeming factor is that the armor, as you upgrade it, that armor can be some of the better armor in the game. Right. So it's like just like little things like that you can find that just as you go throughout the world, as you traverse and do these different favors and stuff that you can find, they're just kind of random, but I don't know, it's pretty cool with their combat, their gear system.
Yeah, it definitely had some good positives for me. I still felt like I didn't get good stats to like kind of end game and build up on stuff. I feel like they had a lot less options for some of like your bonuses. I felt like some of them weren't as good because they were strictly set towards like, oh, if you do this, you'll get an increase to your strength.
Yeah. Which
that's a brief bit of strength to help you out. Whereas I like the ones that it's like, oh, no, you're going to constantly regen health, or this is going to give you your stats a high amount of cooldown, so now your cooldowns are going to be faster. Those are the kind of stuff that I like to look for, which they did have a few, but then when I see those and others don't do a similar thing to it, I see it as, well, now those are kind of more pointless to me, whereas I'll use these because they actually help me with what I want.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they just did a better job overall with the gear and skills and armor, all that fun stuff.
The layout was good, although there were times my controller would mess up and I'd try and go to a specific skill and it wouldn't let me do it because I needed to press over to go into the skill.
Another big part of the gameplay, like we mentioned earlier with the story, is that you spend a lot of time playing as Atreus, which gives you a whole new combat system. You know, he is a ranged character with his bow and arrow, so you're doing a lot of arrow combat as well as melee combat with the bow itself. And I thought Atreus was actually pretty fun to play as. I guess my one thing I wasn't super fond of is their new runic arrow system in this game. I thought was a little underwhelming.
It was. I did not like it that much.
Yeah, you get just it was like sonic arrows and
Hex.
Yeah.
Sigil. Basically.
Sigil. That's right. It was fine. It just
Yeah, I was honestly I was kind of liking his playthrough and not liking some of the fact that when you're playing Kratos, he has a set skill tree and you level it up. But then when you play as Atreus, his skill tree changes and you can't do some of the things that he can do when you're Kratos.
Yeah.
One of the things that he is known for was jumping on the backs of enemies to distract them or inflict stun on them. I think that should have been some kind of how incorporated in his fight style. That he should have been able to kind of attach himself to enemies, get behind them better, because he's agile. He's not Kratos, but he is still doing this nonetheless when you're not playing him, so you should have been able to do a little bit more for him.
Yeah. Still think it was just fun to play as, giving you the different perspective of his style of combat was cool to kind of change up the pacing in the game. And then also a big part of the gameplay when it comes to God of War is the boss fights, which this game had some really good ones. I don't know if it's really a spoiler to talk about some of them, but...
I mean, the one thing I will mention is just, the intro fight.
Yeah.
Because you got, your Baldur fight, and then he literally comes right up to the start of the game, you're fighting Baldur. Mm-hmm. In this one, they do it the same with Thor. And I kind of really liked the differences there. In the first one, this is, older Kratos. He's not as tamed as he was. And so he's very, as you've said before, just very reactive to this scene. Whereas now, he is trying to be different. He's not, when fighting Thor, he is trying to hesitate almost.
I don't think anything has topped that first fight with the Stranger or Baldur in the first game, though. That fight was just such an excellent way to kick off the new God of War.
Yeah, no, that first... I mean, again, it really has a lot to do with the fact that, it is the introduction to a new God of War in
the first
Norse,
one. You're seeing something for the first time.
But it was so good.
It was done so well.
It was done
it's
so well.
We can't top that for a sequel.
The fight with Thor in the beginning is really good. It's hard for me to imagine anything topping that first Baldur fight. And it's probably just due to the initial wow factor that gives you with the new God of War. It was great.
Well, and I think one thing that I really liked is that when you face Thor in the beginning, honestly, when you first face Thor in the beginning, I thought it was a little, initially when you start fighting him, I thought it was a little too easy. Mm-hmm. And then the build, obviously it goes in levels, and so as you hit the second level and the third level, it kind of he becomes stronger and stuff. But I really like how they build him as a character. Honestly, I would agree with you and say that he probably is one of my favorite side characters in the whole game because of the way that they build him and stuff, and when you fight him later on and stuff, I feel like just the combat between Kratos and him is just very, I don't know, unique and cool.
Yeah, Thor's character is just really good. I love in the beginning of the game, Odin and Thor show up to basically tell them hey, let's not be enemies. You killed a few gods in the first God of War game. We don't want that. And when Kratos disagrees, Odin walks out and tells Thor, don't take all day. And I was like, ooh, here we go.
Yeah, it's going down.
Yep.
Yeah, it was really fun. Just some really good boss fights. Like later on in the game, like everything in the final sequence of the game is just amazing. That whole part was awesome. Even when you go to Muspelheim and have to fight some of the minions that Odin sends after you, I really liked that boss fight.
Yeah, the two Valkyries and stuff.
Right. So yeah, as far as the gameplay goes, like what I love, just the combat's really good, the gear system's really good, the boss fights are really good. My gripes, this is where I had my most kind of annoyances with the game, and this is where I actually take score away as far as rating the game, but exploration with some of the realms can be extremely frustrating. When you look at like Vanaheim, like we said earlier, I love Vanaheim, but at the same time, I hate Vanaheim because trying to find my way around some parts of Vanaheim made me angry. So there was just some annoyances because the map is kind of useless when it comes to trying to figure out where some stuff is. You have to just wander around, and there's no real good fast travel within the realm. So if you get lost, you have to find your way back to a gateway to then travel back to the world tree to then travel back to the realm you were already in to try and find where you're going, and just stuff like that I feel like should have been done a little better. So that's where most of my frustration comes from. That, and there's a little bit like the new God of War games do deal more with puzzles in the environment, and some of the puzzle design in this game was a little tedious. I still don't like Nornir chests. I didn't like them in the first game.
I felt like they were at least not as difficult. Some of them were annoying just for like the fact that you had to use your runic arrows. Those ones were annoying.
The arrow chests were the worst.
Yeah, because those ones are annoying because you're like having to your runic arrow. It's the sigil arrow. You have to shoot it on the ground, close as you can get, but you have to kind of like judge like a space
expand it.
Yeah, because you can expand the size of the radius of the arrow's effective range. But then sometimes like you just don't get that straight angle for the view of what you're doing. Because like I remember I'm in Muspelheim trying to get one, and I'm like, I can't reach with my chains to activate this.
And then if you take too long to set it up, the first one will be gone by the time you try it.
It wasn't like a long amount of time either. Like you had to do this fast and know what you were doing.
Yeah.
So, I will admit those ones were annoying. But those were the only ones that were annoying.
It's like stuff like that usually I can forgive. Like if it's minor annoyances, like The Witcher 3, I give a 10 despite the fact that, you know, you've got this really stupid horse that doesn't know how to walk. Because it's stuff you can look past if the game is good enough, but when it gets to the point where it's actually frustrating, that's where I kind of can't just look past it, and this game just gave me that with some of its exploration and puzzle design. Like, there were times when I had to go on YouTube just to figure out, like, how do I get to this objective? And if you're at the point where you have to look up a YouTube guide on just how to get to some place, you know, it's a problem with your game.
I feel like this happens a lot for me in video games, but one of my go-tos is it's like, okay, which is the right way to go so I don't end up going that way, because I like to explore. But in this game, I will go the wrong way regardless, and then I cannot find the right way when I need it.
And it's forgivable if the game gives you the tools to navigate the environment, but this game, like I mentioned, you don't get fast travel within the realm that's good.
And then it's even funnier is you get a little rock that's your new compass, which, again, should have just been there to begin with because you had it in the first game. But you get a compass, and it does not help you in the slightest.
I thought it was annoying because, like, on Svartalheim, in the end game, there's a part where you have to go back to the Apple Core, like where you found Tyr. And if you go look at the map, you just see the outside of the mountain. You're like, okay, this is useless. I'm inside the mountain, and I have no idea where the hell I'm going.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just stuff like that was enough for me to have a genuine complaint with part of the game, which we'll talk about when I finally get to my rating on it. But was there anything else for you, too, that kind of took it down for you a little bit complaint-wise with the gameplay? Or
I guess I kind of mentioned my stuff. It was the skill tree. I really wanted the melee one.
Yeah.
Some of the runic options for skills I felt weren't as good. My favorite runic option from 2018 was there were two that were on the axe. Your light one was that you charged your axe throw, and it was this like massive explosion when it threw. That got turned into a skill, and it was terrible. It was not the same at all. When you threw this runic attack, like everybody was stunned. It did damage, it was worth it.
Mm-hmm.
But now the skill-based form, like you can upgrade it to the max, and it was terrible. So that was kind of one of the bummer things. Is like they did put some stuff in there that it's a free attack now, no cooldown, but it ain't as good as what it could have been.
Yeah.
The other runic attack that I really liked, that was the heavy attack, because it gave me a little diversity, is this one is you throw your axe, and it just kind of spins around to enemies and hits them in the first game.
Mm-hmm.
That I really liked, because then while that's flying around, I could switch to a second weapon and be doing more damage while my axe is still doing damage.
Yeah, I feel like they still give you a lot of really good ones in this game, though. Like, I had fun.
The blades kind of bothered me, because, again, one of my problems is, in this game, enemies don't stagger a lot. So you're around spinning weapons, hitting people. If they're big enough, they're literally just going to tank your hit, and they're going to start hitting you during your attack. I died so many times during runic attacks, because it's like, aren't I hitting you? Shouldn't you be feeling this effect? Not me being taking damage from you hitting me?
I didn't really notice any issues with that. Like, my only thing that would happen is I would do a runic attack on accident or something when a boss was doing, like, an unblockable, and then that would hit me.
That's understandable, because at least it's a warning. And it's an accident that I did the attack. This is when, like, we are distance apart, they haven't swung yet, I'm swinging first. My attack should hit you and you should stagger.
I don't know. Just for me, as far as the gameplay stuff goes, obviously I've kind of told you guys, but for everybody else that's listening, I have not actually played the game. I've just watched it, and so take that as you will.
Wait, really? You haven't?
But honestly, the one thing as I've been watching and stuff that kind of bugs me with kind of games in general is I feel like a lot of like animation canceling and stuff with like if you have finishers that pop up, like right click your analog stick and that's your finisher. Mm-hmm. A lot of the time it's like there's no animation cancel, or there's no like smoothing it into the finisher. So like if you're using the Chaos Blades, you're swinging them around and that thing pops up, you have to wait till your Chaos Blades stop before you can do the finisher, which is one of those things. I guess that's kind of nitpicky, honestly. It's
kind of my nitpicky thing too, because they don't have good cancellations in your attacks and skills, where an enemy is just going to take advantage of those. Yeah. Whereas gameplay hit mechanics is that if they're anywhere near your hitbox, you are going to stagger. It's going to affect you. And I hate those. That's why like some of the skills are still really good, like Hell's Touch, where you can stagger any enemy. I love that they added the fact that you can even cancel them out of their red attack, their unblockable attacks. Mm-hmm. But it's very circumstantial when you actually get to use those.
I don't even think it's that nitpicky, because the game is very much focused on combat.
Yeah, that's true.
Like I told you, my fight with one of the final like optional bosses, I would have got him on my first try if it wasn't for me being stuck in a runic attack when he didn't unblockable. So,
and I feel like a lot of games like that. I mean, God of War. I mean, I think of growing up and stuff with Assassin's Creed. Like I just love those like. Whether they go into slow-mo or just... I love those finisher animations for pretty much every game I've ever played. And so I feel like when you're not able to, cancel out of your current animation, or it doesn't, like, just move into the finisher where you have to, like, stop, it kind of... Combat becomes a little bit more clunky. But if you take that part out, honestly, the combos that you're able to do just within, using the Chaos Blades or using... the different, the other tool that you get and stuff like that. I feel like the animations for those in and of themselves chain well together. It's just when the finisher's at the end or whatever that you can't really...
It's when you need them most that you don't get them.
Yeah, you don't get that. You don't get that animation cancel or that slide into the finisher that makes it look better and feel more, like, smooth.
Right. So yeah, I think that's the majority of the gripes as far as the actual gameplay goes. So let's go ahead and move into our final verdicts here before we have a little bit of a spoiler discussion. I'll lead us off. Just overall, I think it's a very good game. As far as being a follow-up to 2018's God of War, I think it delivers on a lot of the hype and expectations that we have. I would have loved to give this game a 10 out of 10. I just, with those annoyances I mentioned, because I did get a little frustrated, it is enough for me to dock it. So for me, it's a 9. Still fantastic. It's even higher than the 2018 for me, because I think I gave that one an 8 out of 10 due to other grievances I had with that game. So overall, I think it is a very good follow-up and a better sequel than the original. And I think a 9 out of 10 is a good score. What about you, Jeremiah?
So, I agree with your 9 out of 10. However, I also had a few extra gripes for myself that kind of lowered it down to an 8 out of 10 for me. One of my gripes here is I've already platinumed this game. It's only took me 47 hours. I played throughout the weeks that it's been out. The game content I felt just lacked a little bit. I felt like there wasn't as much there as there was in the first one. I'm hoping that will change, though, because I'm hoping for New Game Plus to add stuff, because I know with the first game, New Game Plus literally added your higher levels. Mm-hmm. All of the gear you could re-get to then level up even further. I'm hoping for some other secrets. I learned a lot of just lore for the game, dialogue or Easter eggs for the game. One of my favorite Easter eggs from the first game is it's one of the what are they called, the gates in Tyr's realm change area. One of the platforms in the first game had a hidden cheat code that you actually had to put in, where you look in a certain direction, walk in this direction, and it will open up a realm tear and give you a weapon hilt. Huh. I love stuff like that. That was so cool. We haven't had very long to possibly find something similar. Yeah. But in the way the game looks, I don't see something similar like that being in there.
So when you're saying lacking in content, you're referring more to the end game.
Yes.
When you're done with the story and you're just free to explore the realms.
Because right now, I don't see a reason to go back. I could collect all the material in the game again, go in and level up all of my armor, seeing how I have 1 million hack silver still.
Yeah, see, the game does give you end game content, but it lets you do a lot of it while you're still playing the story, because you have all the optional side bosses that you can go deal with before the game's even over. I had a good balance, so I did a lot of it while I was playing the story, but I had a good 10 hours of stuff to do after I was done with the story. So I feel like I got
mine was only worth. 2 boss fights, and I got them done as soon as I updated my builds.
Yeah.
And once I was done, I was okay. Well, I finished this game. It's time to move on. Wait till there's more to do, or I might wait till there's a New Game Plus.
I'm sure there will be a New Game Plus.
One thing that I'm kind of interested to see if they're gonna do is when I finished the game, when I finished watching the game, just the way that it ended, I feel like could have been kind of like how Resident Evil came out with an additional DLC for Rose.
Yeah.
I feel like there could potentially be room for that, where it's not a completely different game, but just an addition to. So maybe later, maybe in a couple months down the line, or maybe a year down the line,
right,
maybe they'll create an additional DLC for.
See, that's where I'm thinking we could go with that as well. Once we get into spoilers, we'll kind of go further into that too.
Yeah, they are definitely setting it up to be further expanded. And we'll just talk about it once we start diving into the spoilers. But what about...
that's kind of my rating, 8 out of 10. Got 9 out of 10. Paul, what do you give it?
I would say for someone, again, this is someone who has not legitimately played the game. This is just watching and reading different content and stuff like that from people. The specific people, I don't know if you want me to name drop or anything.
Oh, it's whatever you want.
Okay, yeah, so a couple of the people that I've been watching is Jacksepticeye and the Rad Brad, who does just straight walkthroughs and stuff. He's not finished yet, but I bounced between a couple of different people on YouTube and then just a couple of different sources just reading. For me, I would probably give it a 9 or 9.5. Again, it's going to be one of those things where you're going to have to take it without gameplay, take that with a grain of salt. But the thing for me, I guess, that doesn't make it quite a 10, it kind of goes back to the whole, because I feel like I recently went back through the original trilogy of God of War and then went back and watched through the 2018 and played some of the 2018 again. I did play 2018 all the way through. But just like kind of going back through stuff, the character development is phenomenal. I believe there are some parts that are kind of lacking, some maybe emotional sides to other characters that should show more emotion or should react specific ways, just according to how they've been reacting throughout the game, that didn't react the way that I believe they should have.
See, I get that. I get that. We'll go into it soon. We're going into it soon.
So for me, I feel like that's where it's kind of lacking. Is there's some character things, some story things that I feel like don't quite make sense with how the character was built from the beginning of this specific game, not even including the first game. So like. Yeah. Just that, I mean, a lot of the character development has been phenomenal, but some of the decisions that they decided to take with some of the characters and some reactions to things I don't necessarily love. But just as a story overall, and just as the game as I've watched it, has been phenomenal.
Yeah, it kind of, one thing that's interesting, since you strictly only watched it, like you said, it kind of speaks highly of the game that it's even that entertaining just to watch someone else play it, because it is a very cinematic game. So it is really cool that even just watching it, you can have such high praise for the game, missing the gameplay itself. So yeah, 9 to 9.5, 9 and an 8.
Yep.
So it's a really good game. Like, it's definitely absolutely worth your time. If you played 2018 and you enjoyed the story, it's worth a buy. I would pay full price for it in a heartbeat. I think it's definitely worth it, minor frustrations aside.
And I say I haven't bought it yet, but I will be buying it. I just typically I have this thing where I have single player games, and if I start playing a single player game but then stop playing video games for like 3 months, then I kind of lose the story and stuff. And so I feel like, especially with games, and this is also proof to me that if the game is good enough for me to watch it and then buy it later and play it again, even though having known the story, I feel like just speaks to how well it's written and how well the story is. Again, that's missing the gameplay of the confusion, or confusion with the map and all of that stuff. But just as far as the story goes and the gameplay with the story goes, I think it's just, it's good enough to buy it.
Okay. Well, yeah, final ratings aside, let's go ahead and shift over to a little bit of a spoiler discussion. So we will be going into everything that happens with the story. So if you are waiting to play the game, go play it. It's really good. Maybe if you have already played the game and you're just curious to get our thoughts, that's just kind of what we're going to do here, is discuss what we thought about it. So let's start here with just the story itself.
Okay, so going back into the story here, getting into this now, I already know where you're kind of going with this, and I'm thinking it's the same character that I had the same issue with. We have a good example first. We have Freya. Freya is PO'd with Kratos at the start of this. She is hell-bent on killing him. I don't even know if she was planning to kill Atreus. I feel like she was just directing all of her anger towards Kratos at this time. That is placement anger there. It is semi-justified. She knows.
I think hers was justified. I mean, it's kind of like blinded, because Baldur was also trying to kill her, but
kill them. Like, there is no stopping him here. Yeah. The only thing he could have done differently is, okay, well, now that I gave you pain, let me break your legs really quick so you stop walking.
Yeah, it's just, she's trying to be a good mom, and I did think that was funny in 2018, where she's like, if it makes you happy, Baldur, you can kill me. And I'm like, oh, she's a good mom.
She is crying, but she did not still do very well.
Yeah.
Now, again, great character development for her to finally redirect where her anger truly lied towards Odin. A lot of it was his fault. Like, he is the one who sent Baldur after them.
Right.
He is not the one that caused her son to be angry with her.
Yeah, so one thing I want to side note, and this was similar to the tavern scene, another one of my favorite sequences in the game.
Yep.
You get the scene where Kratos is, going back to get Atreus. There's the part where he goes through the rift portal as Atreus basically gets caught red-handed after being gone
for 2 days.
And then
that was even when he went to Ironwood. Not even his fault. He just went there.
But then you get a Valkyrie show up out of nowhere, which gives you a good boss fight with Atreus and Kratos and the Valkyrie. Lo and behold, the Valkyrie is Freya trying to once again kill Kratos. And you get this really cool sequence where Atreus transforms into his bear form and goes to kill Freya, and Kratos stops him and is holding him back, and he's like, no, that is our friend, control it, control your anger. And Freya gets to realize that despite how much Freya is trying to kill them, Kratos is still being favorable to her. And that's where you first kind of see the shift with Freya's character going back to understanding the situation. And I loved how Kratos kind of gave her the idea. He's like, I know that we killed your son, but think of why. It all ties back to Odin.
To put, this perspective to it's not his fault. Yeah. It was the situation. That goes back to the fate, the prophecy, I was not destined to kill your son. This is just what happened. Right. These are the circumstances that led to it happening.
Yeah, and it's like Baldur didn't give them a choice. You know? Yeah. Kratos chose to save Freya's life because Baldur was trying to kill Freya. And I just loved what it did with the story. That whole sequence was just awesome.
I actually have to say that Freya is not the one that I find issue in.
Here's the bad one. Sindri. Is that who it is?
So Sindri's one of them. Sindri's one of them. I actually want to make a side note with one thing that I feel like they did really, really well is when they implemented at the very end when they let you play with Loki or Atreus in his rage form as a bear. I think that was so cool. Cool. Honestly, at the very oh my gosh, it kind of kills me when he's like, "Oh, I have to leave," and then I was like, "Wait, you get to play with Loki or Atreus as the bear once."
Yeah, I was so bummed because I was so bummed. I was like, I swear, if we don't get to play a Bears at one point in this game, I'm still gonna be pissed.
Dude, that, I feel like that whole sequence right there was super good. And then kind of going back a little bit into one of the side quests you take on, where I can't remember which realm you're in, but you find this father and son who have separated to find the treasure, whatever, and they
Svartalheim.
Svartalheim, and they decided to separate because of danger and all that, and then they both end up dying. And I think it's kind of interesting, that dynamic of when you think about it with Kratos and Atreus. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's very easy to look at that and be like, they do this all the time. Both of them are like, oh, well, it's gonna make things better if I just go do this by myself, whatever. But, sorry, kicking it back to what we were talking about and, just the whole emotions thing. So, there is Sindri. I feel like that should have its own thing on its own. But one thing that I actually really didn't love how it ended was the lack of reaction for Sif and Thrud.
Sif and Thrud?
There was, she literally watched her grandfather, who up until this point, she believed wholeheartedly was innocent,
a good person, yeah.
That she literally witnesses Odin stab Thor with the spear,
and then throw the hammer into her too.
So I feel like the lack of reaction there kind of killed me at the end. I thought that was so weird, so weird.
Well, I feel like Thrud had some reaction, didn't she? I don't remember what Sif did.
She was... Well, it was mostly, unless you're thinking of, because the one time we see Thrud and Sif together is only after Atreus wakes back up, we walk through the cave, and they're talking.
And there's no... And there might have been, they're maybe behind the scenes, whatever, but I feel like in that moment, that's, really the last time that I know of that you, really see them together.
They are kind of a proud people, I'd say, so they might not be as emotional as we have with scene with Freya, Sindri, because did you read then that she showed Thrud comes back again.
With Mjolnir.
Yeah, we see her again with Mjolnir,
yeah.
And
Well, and, like,
she is going to progress onward.
The moment that she was like, like I knew exactly because I was like, I mean, the last time you see her is when he throws Mjolnir at her and then she goes flying off. But like when Atreus is walking up, she's like, I have something that I need to take care of here or whatever before I can continue doing whatever I'm gonna do. And like as soon as she said that, I was like, she's gonna go look for Mjolnir because Thor's dead.
Yeah.
I think they did a good job with Thrud and Sif because you do get the hints early on. Like Sif starts having doubts towards Odin because it's Odin's fault that Thor's sons were killed.
Yeah.
And she's starting to realize that Thor is still being obedient, but you get the hints that Sif's starting to turn against him. Thrud, up until the final sequence with Ragnarok, was still believing Odin, but then you get the shift where Kratos is like, if my son trusts you, I trust you, which was really cool.
Yeah, that was super cool.
Yeah, I like that they all fought together too. In the end, like she was helping them.
And I was reading something this morning that was like, one of the main reasons that this article believes that because kind of at the very beginning, at the end of last game and the beginning of this one, we kind of go throughout this thing, kind of thinking with maybe the thought in our head that Kratos is gonna die because that's what that's what's written.
That's what we're thinking.
That's what's written by the giants or whatever. And so, as you're kind of going throughout this whole thing, you kind of have this, or at least for me, I kind of had this thought in the back of my head. I was like, okay, so how is that gonna happen? But in this article that I read this morning, it was like, we think that the main reason that he didn't end up dying is because of the rest of his story. And like the reason why they've been able to, whatever, that they claim that they're not kind of going through fate, or like fate is not, destiny is not why they're doing everything
they're doing.
Exactly. It's just how they naturally respond to everything, and so that's kind of how everybody's going throughout this whole story. But then in this article that I read, it was like, the thing is, if Kratos, you put Kratos in that situation 3-4 years ago, beginning of 2018 game, he would have killed Thor.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He would have. He would not have stopped. So like, or at least in my opinion, But
no,
like,
I think you're right because it plays with. There's a lot of dialogue in the game where Kratos is even like, I have to be better. We have to be better, and he even tells Thor, "You have to be better."
Yeah.
You've got your daughter Thrud, who very much looks up to you.
Yeah.
And I loved him just going ultra dad mode in this game compared to old school Kratos.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie here. That the bedtime story he told Atreus.
Oh, bro.
That's
a good one.
That story. I mean, like, I loved the animation that you see just his lip quivering a little bit while he's talking sometimes, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this man is falling apart.
I'm not a very emotional person. I feel like I grew up very much in a way of like, men don't show their emotion, all that stuff. I feel like a lot of guys are. Yeah. And so like I don't like being emotional, but there were a lot of cinematic parts towards the end of the game that like had me choking up.
I was like, oh my god. I mean, like, so then there's another thing that happens at the end of the game that I don't know if you saw. Then did you see the funeral?
Yep.
Oh my god.
So let's we'll talk about the whole Brock and Sindri thing in just a moment. There's one more thing I want to touch on because how you guys were talking about how Kratos was supposed to die or whatever. It seemed like that was going to be the case. Did you catch? So the mural they look at in the first game on Jotunheim, it's portrayed as if it's Kratos dying in Atreus' arms. That's what everyone thought. He's like, oh well, Kratos is probably going to die in the next game. But then in this game, at the very end, remember it's Odin who dies in Atreus' arms as the soul leaves his body. That's what was painted on the mural. So it was never Kratos; it was Odin.
Oh,
that's
a good point.
Yeah,
I did not think
so
about
then
that.
what's the continued prophecy then though? Because we still see that in Angraboda's form where it was complete, that Loki is shown walking with Odin then.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not.
That's the one thing
because I do agree though, because what we see there is we see Loki learns that ability to pull the soul out. Mm-hmm. And that is what I believe that mural is depicting, is that he was like, that could have been Kratos, that would have been him, like, okay, let me save my father's soul by putting him in here.
Well, I think if you look at it though, like, it's not Kratos' war stripe, it's Odin's eye patch on the mural.
Is it really? I might have to look at that again
But yeah, it's
because in the 2018 it is Kratos, but then in Angrboda I don't remember exactly like the full picture of it.
Yeah, I can't remember. I can't remember. One thing, I mean, kind of with those murals as well at the very end of the game when Kratos goes to the one behind the first one. Do you guys think that is kind of a picture depicting him being like the new All-Father?
I don't know if like All-Father is the title.
Yeah, I think it's depicting him as a hero of Ragnarok.
It is depicting him as like
the champion.
A renowned hero or not really kind of like worship but praised.
Yeah, which he is like, what?
Yeah. He does definitely have that moment where he's like
in the first part of it, Odin even talks to him he talks down to him like you are not a loved god. You don't know what it's like to be praised.
Right.
But this is going to counteract that. This is going to be like a change that he could be praised by others.
Right.
People might respect him and thank him.
Yeah, you see Kratos' reaction to seeing people depicted as like, praising him and looking up to him as a god, and he gets a little emotional and taken aback by it, which was pretty cool to see. So yeah, that part was really great. And then, so now we can kind of shift over. We do get a pretty major character death in the game. It is of a side character. But yeah, Brock.
He's a main character.
Well, I mean,
He's a main side. It's fine.
So what happens early on in the game, you guys rescue Tyr from the prison on Svartalheim. Lo and behold, later on, it's revealed Tyr was Odin the whole time in disguise spying on them.
I knew it the whole time.
I had no idea.
I didn't know he was Odin, but I knew Tyr was not acting like he should be.
Yeah, I had no idea.
So yeah,
plus, way too easy. He was in the first room we went into.
You had to open 3 different doors. It took some time. But yeah, it's just revealed that Odin, because Odin's very much depicted as being this like very manipulative character. He has means to an end to do whatever it takes, no matter how morally questionable it is. And there's a scene where they're advancing to start Ragnarok, and then Tyr just stabs Brock, and we're like, whoa, hold on, what's going on? And it's Odin. He just transforms into Odin, tries to get the mask back from Atreus. It was a big gotcha moment. And that's where you start to see a lot of the old Kratos come back. That's where he's driven by vengeance there for a moment before he kind of snaps back to the dad reality.
Yeah, before they find the Midgardians during Ragnarok. But another thing that I kind of find interesting with that whole scenario, I mean, because earlier in the game you find out that that Sindri goes, like, so Brock dies originally a couple years back or whatever.
He had died like years ago, and it was Sindri that brought him back from that accident.
Well, Sindri doesn't bring him back in his entirety, though. That's the problem. Sindri only, so there's the 4 parts of the soul, and Sindri only brings back 3 of the parts. And so when you go back to have the, to get the new tool or the spear.
The spear.
Yeah, when you go back to get that, the mermaid completely ignores him because he's missing that part of his soul.
Right.
And I think it's so interesting that Sindri, you'll find as you finish the rest of the game, Sindri just hates everyone. Like he just gets pissed off and just freaking like loses it.
Yeah, that's what I just don't get, because he was good friends, like they loved Faye, Kratos' wife, and both of them wanted to help Kratos and Atreus. They grew fond of them. Atreus did way more horrible things to Sindri than anybody else.
It's pretty bad.
Dude literally called him out in the first game, was calling him his tiny problems. Yep. Then in this game, he smacks him as a bear, hurts him.
Yeah, I actually understand his lack of forgiveness on Atreus' part a little bit more.
So I'm kind of, I think his reaction to the whole situation was actually fairly justified,
but it almost kind of represents the same thing though that happens with Freya. It's blind anger because it wasn't Kratos that killed them.
Well, yeah, it's just the way that you perceive it, because Brock died because Atreus pushed for them to rescue Tyr. So in a way, it's because of Atreus' actions.
Yeah.
But also, yes, like Atreus straight up attacked Sindri when he turned into a bear just out of anger. So I can kind of see him being bitter about it, and I do think that maybe.
I just hope he doesn't become an enemy
Yeah,
or become like an adversary again.
I could honestly see that. Like
That's what I'm
legitimately,
saying.
I could see
it's
him
just
become.
like, I don't want it though, because that's gonna even be even harder. But looking at like how we just saw Freya here, where she was a total adversary and we had to help her, like at that fight scene, and I could see something like that again, but. It's just gonna be so hard.
See, and my thing is like I'm kind of with you, Dylan. I can understand how like how that can be like why he reacted the way he did.
Yeah.
The one thing for me, I feel like because you'll find out a little bit later as well, because Atreus asks Mimir, "Is there a way to save him again?" Essentially, and Mimir's like, "No, because
there's nothing to save."
Yeah, there's nothing to save because he doesn't have his whole soul. Like you'd be saving his soul, and because it wasn't whole, you lose everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so the one thing that I kind of thought with that is like, honestly, that in and of itself, the only person that Sindri can blame is himself.
Yeah, should have got all the soul fragments.
Because like, I mean, even immediately as Brock gets stabbed, Sindri's like, I can go down and we can like try and find the soul to like bring him back or whatever. But like, for me, like looking at that in that way, I was like, the only person that Sindri can truly blame is himself, because if he would not have gone back to save Brock, then in the afterlife, however that works out with Norse mythology, then he would have had an afterlife with him.
True.
But
now
he
he's
took
deprived
that.
of
Now
an
he's
afterlife.
deprived even of that.
He deprived himself of that. So, like, really, I can understand as far as grief goes why he'd be frustrated with everybody else. But I feel like if they decide to take this story further, they cannot ignore that fact. They cannot ignore the fact that it was because of Sindri that Brock could not, have an afterlife.
Yeah, I think they do overplay it just a tiny bit, because like you do get the very optional end scene where they have Brock's funeral and Sindri still being extremely bitter. I think they could have calmed him down a little bit by then, maybe just like cold shoulder, but not just being a jerk about it.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they're gonna kind of do something to clean it up or expand on it. Which one thing I do kind of want to shift to talking about is where we think it's going, because the end of the game, you see Kratos let Atreus go to accomplish his mission of kind of finding
the rest of the giants.
Yeah, like either gathering the rest of the giant orbs or finding a home for them, kind of like he did with the snake on
Which
Jotunheim.
I love that story, and then like the whole fact, like, because when you play as Atreus, you go to the her grandma, Angrboda's grandmother's, and you give the snake. Like the second I saw the massive size snake there, I was like, "What? Why is there a massive snake in here? What's gonna happen?"
That just occurred to me.
Did that click for
Oh
you?
my gosh! Yeah, no, I didn't even think about that.
That snake is the big snake.
Oh,
that is
no way.
Yeah, you don't
Jormungandr.
remember?
Jormungandr, yeah.
During the whole Ragnarok sequence, they comment on how the snake looked different.
Yes.
So yeah, the snake Jormungandr during Ragnarok is that snake somehow making its way to Midgard.
The explanation on it, because it's said in Norse mythology when Thor has his fight with Jormungandr, which he did in the first game.
Yeah,
They go through time.
Like he hits him so hard that he like
It
you would say,
teleported him
my
in
mom
time."
knocked me into last week. That's what Thor did to Jormungandr.
I mean, it was a few more than a few weeks.
Yeah,
but in this case,
Exact same meaning. Exact same meaning.
same meaning.
Yeah, so then you see Atreus put a giant soul in the snake on Jotunheim, which then leads to Jormungandr being at the fight at Ragnarok.
So that snake, it was still a massive snake, but that is Jormungandr, very young,
Yeah.
and eventually he gets to Midgard. I don't understand how they get there, but the snake then, it was during the fight of Ragnarok that Jormungandr is sent back, and then that Jormungandr is our present Jormungandr.
Yeah.
And if you actually look at Midgard, he's not there at the mountaintop anymore, but his body is still frozen and part of the water. And that Jormungandr is still there.
That's pretty cool. That is not that like those few lines were just kind of throwaway lines for me. I didn't really think about it that much.
Yeah,
but that's cool.
That's the one thing I admire so much about this game is they give you context and exposition for everything.
Yeah.
Like, So yeah, and then just like we were mentioning, so Atreus goes off on his own mission at the end of the game. So when you're doing end game stuff, Atreus isn't even there. You're just going around with Freya. And what I think, or at least what I would hope they're going to do, is kind of like a Spider-Man Miles Morales situation where we're going to get a standalone game, not like a full AAA title, but kind of like a side game that's big enough to be its own thing where you play as Atreus would be my guess.
Yep.
Fulfilling his mission with Angrboda, which is, I think, would be a really good way to wrap up the whole Norse saga because it does leave a lot of questions still open.
Also, I totally ship Kratos and Freya.
Dude, I actually feel that we actually had this discussion at work. We were like, that would be.
They've
pretty
got
cool.
lots. They've got experience. They're both gods. Like they could be happy together.
I could see it.
The one thing that I think, it's kind of funny because I say this, but because of the fact that I've never played, obviously you have to take it with a grain of salt. But I feel like if they do decide to do that, they have to flesh out Atreus' combat more.
Yeah.
They have to
With,
flesh
like,
it
the,
out more if they decide to do that.
Right.
With his own game kind of thing.
And
Yeah.
if they do, if they do this, they better freaking add the bear as a rage thing. Because
Yeah.
I'll be so upset if they don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm hoping for some more magic because he is very keen on that. And then I kind of I loved with when we had Ingrid. I really wish we would have gotten a tree for that again though.
Oh yeah.
Because
I loved Ingrid as
Ingrid was such a good like magic weapon for him. I kind of didn't like that it was an ally. I would have rather had it as my own weapon to alternate from the bow.
Yeah.
Oh.
But that's just not his character.
That's the thing though, is I loved the fact that Ingrid was, it wasn't just a tool. Ingrid was his whatever item's own character. Like it had its own personality. That's one thing that I really liked about Ingrid.
Yeah, it is revealed that it was Freyr's sword, so Freya's brother, who also dies in the game.
Yeah.
As he, so at the very end, which we didn't even touch on, Surtur.
Yeah, no.
But you get Ragnarok where Surtur's thrusting his sword into the core of Asgard, and you get a scene where Freyr uses Ingrid to hold it back long enough for Kratos and everyone to get out of the realm, which I thought was really cool.
And Fenrir, we've completely forgot
Oh,
Fenrir
yeah.
too.
Fenrir, yeah.
Yeah, the very opening of the game, you get the scene where, so it's established that, Atreus already has 3 wolves. One of them is Fenrir, who is dying at the beginning of the game and does die, but then you see Atreus, accidentally absorb Fenrir's soul into his knife. Which the second we got to Helheim and saw Garm, I was like, I know exactly where this is going. So yeah, you end up getting Fenrir back as a result of Kratos transferring the soul from his knife into Garm in Helheim, which was really cool because I'm like, how are they going to explain, Fenrir becoming a giant wolf?
Yep.
So I thought they did a really good job with that.
And that's also Garm is the one battle in Helheim that is kind of reminiscent of old God of War combat, where it's just this big animal that you have to fight, and they fight him one time they legitimately think he's dead.
Yeah, they fight him the first time, then you fight him your second time.
Yeah.
And it's the finishing of that second fight is when he kind of runs off and you...
Yeah.
I love it too how the first go at it, Atreus is like, please, let's just try and do this my way. It doesn't work instantly, and Kratos is like, no, we're doing this my way.
Your way did not work. Going back to my way now.
Which reminds me of another side dialogue they had. Remember when Freya asked Kratos, he's like, tell me about one of your adversaries you fought, in your old life. And he talks about Medusa. And he's like, there was 2 ways to kill her. Either turn her gaze back at herself with a mirror or cut off her head. And she's like, well, which way did you choose? And he's like, the hard way.
The hard way. I cut off her head.
Yep.
I was like, Kratos is just great.
One situation that I feel really emphasizes what Kratos as a character and how he kind of shows his flashes of just his former self is when Mimir falls off of his back because he has him on his back pelt or whatever, falls off, and Mimir is facing Kratos as Kratos chokes out Heimdall essentially.
Right.
And I feel just him and because Mimir even in that moment is dude, stop, what are you what are you doing, stop. But and obviously the first time he tries to walk away, but then Heimdall's too proud to to let him just walk away. He's like, you're not gonna take pity on me. If you're gonna take me down, you're gonna kill me.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like that's one moment that I feel like Kratos shows a flash of like what he was, and
Right. Yeah, that was really good too, because you get the initial part where he's just like bashing Heimdall's face in, and then he chokes him out, and I'm like, oh. I mean, Heimdall deserved it.
Yeah,
for sure, for sure. No, it makes me think of two situations in the original trilogy. One when he's punching Zeus and he goes into first person mode, and you see Kratos just freaking beating the crap, like, and Zeus is like just bloody, and it's just, I mean, the whole situation is super bloody and super, M for mature, anyways. But just the whole situation, and I feel like it was very reminiscent of that moment where it was Kratos just straight vengeance, and like all you see is just anger, and all you can feel in that situation is his anger, and it's just like it's so cool that they kind of tossed it back.
Yeah, and it's that anger that drives him into Ragnarok and kicking it off. But I loved, which I didn't think I would like it at first, because when they hinted during the Battle of Ragnarok, where Kratos kind of shifts mindsets back to not doing it for vengeance, but for doing it for justice. Yeah. Initially, I didn't think I would like that change during the climax of your game, but then I think it actually paid off pretty well.
Yeah.
And the whole final fight with Thor and Odin, I thought was just so good. Like, just the whole confrontation, because Kratos does finally get Thor to realize the situation. And then right as he does, of course, Odin kills Thor, which is too bad, because Thor is just so good.
Yeah, Thor was so good. So good.
Indeed.
But yeah, just really good boss fights at the end. Like, one that we kind of touched on earlier, the boss fight in Muspelheim where he fights the two Valkyries.
Yep.
That final sequence where you have basically like a quick time event where you have Kratos in his bear form beating on one Valkyrie while Kratos beats another. And I thought that whole sequence was just awesome.
Yeah.
Really good stuff from a lot of the fights and everything. And the whole Ragnarok sequence was really good, which, if that sequence failed, I could easily see it bringing the whole game down as a result. So I think they nailed it.
One thing, speaking about kind of going back to it's called the Spark of the World?
Spark of the World, where Muspelheim and Niflheim meet.
Oh my goodness. So like, the beauty of this world and like these different areas that they've created is just, I mean, the guy that I was watching when he walked into the Spark of the World, I was just like, holy, I seriously paused the YouTube video and I was like, oh my gosh, like this area is beautiful, like, oh my goodness.
I love like the different change effect too, because you go from like this massive volcano world, everything's just lava and melting, and you walk into this cave and all of a sudden it just opens up to this like colorful room.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, wow, that's such a change.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
And then I will always love that frozen lightning in Midgard. Like, I just...
I love that. Yeah, I love that cool. It's just there.
So cool.
Even the optional exploration on Vanaheim. Was that Vanaheim or the other spot?
Yeah, it's Vanaheim because it's in the crater. We still don't know exactly what happened. All we do know is that it was Faye who fought Thor. And there was a battle there between the two of them.
I love how that's completely optional content to get the context on why that's there, but it's important for the story if you do. And I thought it was really cool.
I really liked it.
Faye fought Thor, which Kratos didn't even know, again tying into how they all kind of kept secrets from each other. But yeah, just cool stuff to flesh out on that the game didn't have to do.
Another thing I guess they did too as well that kind of is similar to that is Surtur dying because he was Ragnarok. He is gone in Niflheim, or not.
It is Niflheim, yeah.
Yeah, Niflheim, the ice area. Mm-hmm. The love of his life is there, and they actually have audio for her crying.
Yeah. You go back, you can hear her crying in the distance.
What?
They have a dialogue that she knows.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
See, it's the small side stuff like that you don't always get to see with watching, that you get to experience by yourself. It's just little hidden treasures.
Yeah.
Small things.
Gotta love them.
I mean, another small one that this reminded me of was the fact that like Freya kept Atreus' mistletoe arrowhead.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
like,
that was so cool.
She takes it really right at the first part of the game, and it's not until the very end of the game that she gives it back. And she kept it on her the entire time.
I also love all the little dialogues between Atreus and Kratos when they're like, "Oh, the last time that I saw, Freya," and he's like, "What?" And he's like, yeah, it's a story for later." Like, "Oh yeah, my bad. That happened when I did that the first time, or like when I snuck away or whatever." Like, just all those like little dialogues are just super.
Oh
funny.
yeah, true. Because Atreus is hiding a lot from Kratos in the game. Yeah, so I mean, as far as talking about spoilers, was there anything else we kind of wanted to talk about, or anything we maybe missed?
I think we covered a good amount of it.
Yeah.
Definitely just for like what's to come is like I'm really hoping for extra content for this game.
Mm-hmm.
I want like a good new game plus, something new to do, because now if I have a new game plus, I'm just gonna be doing the same thing I already did with better gear now because I have everything.
Yeah.
Like I don't even have like a lot of my skill tree is done. I only have like 4 skills that I just need to have XP for to max out. So if there's nothing new skill tree wise, I'm gonna have a waste there. Artifacts I collected, or not the artifacts, the relics. I collected all the really good relics and maxed most of them out that I wanted to use. So then again, that loses more gameplay there.
I mean,
So
for
I'm
me,
hoping for just some things to add, like another horde mode room or content to like kind of fight bosses in.
For me, I mean, just going through and playing the story again with a little more challenge would be enough.
You gotta do that. Give me God of War challenge.
Yeah. But yeah, I could see them adding, like, maybe they can throw in some additional Muspelheim trials or add some more exploration on some of the realms.
Just
or
something else to kind of unlock something more would be really nice.
I'm interested to see what because the company that released these games said that this is going to be the last in Norse mythology. So I'm kind of interested to see what
There is, they do have like a hint out right now, which I'm not sure what the mythology will be based on, but it's yoga style. So I don't know what mythology that comes from.
Yoga?
Yeah.
Because
Because Tyr, when we find him in the prison, he is now in every realm. So if you revisit, you can find him again.
Yeah,
and in every single realm, he is doing a type of yoga or meditation. And that only makes me think of like Buddhism or Hinduism, because it's like
I was
like
thinking
spiritual.
I was thinking something like that, like those kind of Asian central kind of mythologies. One other mythology that I thought of as well, that if they wanted to take it into a different mythology direction, is Egyptian.
Yeah.
Would be really
Egyptian mythology.
I don't know if you guys know, but when they were developing the first, like the soft reboot for God of War, they were initially looking at Egyptian mythology before they decided to switch over to Norse. And they hint at that in the game because you see Kratos in Tyr's vault looking at the vase that's very much like hieroglyphed out.
Yeah.
So I think it will become a franchise and we'll see Kratos jump. But the one thing I want to happen before that happens is to explain how he's shifting.
Yeah.
Because we don't even know how he got to Norse mythology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's one thing. Between the third the original trilogy, between the original trilogy and the 2018, there's this whole gap. And I remember before the 2018 came out, I went through and was Google searching and was just looking throughout, because I was like, he just kind of appears in Norse mythology, but you don't really learn anything about those in between years from what I could read. And so I was like, I have no idea.
The only thing I know is that they did do some dialogue for it. I know Ratatoskr, the squirrel of the world tree, he had asked him, like, what was Greece's world tree like? Kratos mentions that they don't have a world tree.
Yeah.
They sailed to their locations by boat. And that's basically kind of like my idea of what he just did. He sailed away from Greece and ended up here.
See, my, I guess, theory or hypothesis on it would be something to do with the realm tear that Odin was obsessed with and where they had the mask and everything. I was like, maybe that'll tie into it somehow.
Okay.
That could be interesting.
Because that's another thing that doesn't really get any explanation.
Yeah, why the realm tear's there.
Yeah, because he just breaks the mask and then...
Yeah. So this is where I'm hoping that if we get a standalone game with Atreus, it'll kind of close some of those hanging questions and explain as we move forward. Because I'm sure we're going to get Kratos again. I would love to see him in another mythology, but at the same time, I can't imagine him doing it like without Atreus and Freya. Yeah. So it'll be really interesting to see what they do, but I think they've got a really good opportunity to expand on it because it's just been so good already with the two games.
Like with Egypt, my one hesitation for it would be it's very deserty, and I just like with how we see these realms here, we see tropical lands. We have snow now in Midgard, which kind of covers it and makes it that just kind of barren kind of wasteland, just covered in snow.
Yeah.
I just feel if we go to Egypt, we might get that a lot. I do know there are locations that are like gods have created paradises for, so we might get a little bit, but it'd be interesting. Like the main thing I would see would be well-crafted characters again with Egyptian. So I don't know. Like I like Egyptian, but then I also would like to see something kind of new.
I wouldn't even mind if they took the approach of just kind of diving all in on the realm traversal, where maybe we get a game where they're just going between multiple different
that would be really interesting. I hope it'd be a big game though.
Yeah.
It
would have to be.
Yeah, like I would want like hours of over here in this realm, hours to do over in that realm.
Yeah, they would just have to set it up properly, and that's where there is kind of some pressure for them to do some explanation before they expand on it. So really hoping some sort of content with Atreus will clean that up. But
the one thing that I really hope with that is if they do decide to go on to some other mythology and stuff, I just really don't want them to draw it out and suck everything out that they possibly can because, Kratos, I mean, there's only so much you can do with him and he's getting older. So it's like he's kind of starting to lean into that. He could be like, if they decided to move on, like I don't know if they would do much more with Kratos himself. Maybe he would become like the All-Father, whatever, just because his like that would be his like quote unquote retirement, like where it would be like him.
Because I could definitely see like a torch being passed. Because like you said, he is getting old. He is trying to grow from his past experiences and change. So seeing him have to then go through other realms and fighting other mythologies just sounds kind of counterproductive. That it's like I have bettered myself. Now I got to go kill another group of mythologies.
That's where my guess would be that through Atreus's like own mission, he's gonna find some sort of drive and objective to explain them having to do it.
Yeah,
and I think it will lead to Kratos probably dying or just letting him take over. But there's just so much they could do with it. So I'm genuinely very curious to see what
I'm looking forward to it. That's for sure.
And one thing that I really like that I would want them to keep if they do keep extending him into other mythologies and stuff. Is one thing that I feel like they did a lot of and did a lot of callback in this in Ragnarok is that they kind of kept his Spartan like home kind of like when he gets the spear and they're like, wow, you're really good at using the spear, and he's like, this is the first weapon we learned how to use in Sparta.
Yeah.
So like they kind of keep those Spartan elements within Kratos as they kind of build the story and stuff. So if they do decide to expand into other mythologies and stuff, I do hope that they kind of call back to that every now and again. Mm-hmm. Not excessively, of course, because it can get too much, but like I feel like they should try and keep that to his story because that is who Kratos is.
Yeah. So I think that pretty much wraps up everything we wanted to cover today. Just a review itself of the game as well as a discussion into the story itself, where we kind of want to see it go. So with all that being said, we just want to take a moment to thank you if you made it this far. Thank you for listening. If you're listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify, feel free to leave us a review. We're also on YouTube. Feel free to comment if you like the episode or if you have ideas for what you'd like to see us cover. We are also on Instagram and Twitter. If you check the description on this episode, feel free to give us a follow. But with that being said, thank you for listening, and we hope to catch you guys in the next episode.
Goodbye.
Bye.